Okay, so yeah, I am a lawyer, so CPA lawyer. How many other lawyers? We have a few other lawyers in the room. Yeah, so, but I don't know a lot about tech, or I didn't until about 3 years ago. I just knew that climate change was the most important thing that we had to deal with as a society, and I was trying to dedicate my life to it because it's the biggest issue we have to deal with. And if we can't put every knowledge that we have and all the different ways that we need to think about solving problems to this issue, then what's the point? Because it's going to change everything. We're going through the biggest industrial revolution we've ever seen, and we're doing it as fast as possible in order to save our species. So I did go to law school because of climate change. I studied ecology. I wanted to be an ecologist. My philosophy professor, actually, I was really into philosophy and ecology, and I wanted to be an academic, and the academic said, have you thought about going to law school? And I said, well, I don't know, do I want to go to law school? So I took the LSAT, I'm like, oh, I guess I'll go to law school. I ended up at U of T Law School, and I was gonna be an activist, and then I realized, well, maybe I should try Bay Street and see what happens. Can I be an activist within? Right? And so I actually joined one of the largest law firms in Canada. I was an environmental lawyer right out of the gates, which is really amazing, but one day my partner, the boss, came to me and said, Laura, can you stop talking about climate change? You're an environmental lawyer, you're busy, it was 2008, you're busy, just put your head down and write another memo. Right? Basically, he wasn't that mean. He's still a mentor to me. But he was like, you're in the system. Are you in the system? And I'm like, I'm out of the system. So I started my own law firm at the age of 27. I started the first climate change law firm in Canada focused on, just thinking about what does a climate change lawyer do? And that was actually the gift that got me to where we are now. Because what does a climate change lawyer do? They go back to first principles. They go back to why are we thinking about this? And reasonable foreseeability and all of these things. And then I became like connecting the dots for people on climate, and I realized we were doing the same thing over and over again. Right, so that's the story. So this is the deck that is like more about Manifest Climate, but that's a little bit about how I got here. So we're actually, like, how do I convince people that this is the most important thing when they're busy doing their thing? So you have to talk to them, you have to meet them where they are, talk about business risk and opportunity. This is no longer about what your business is doing to the climate. This is no longer about feeling guilty for your decisions. This is no longer about everyone saying carbon neutrality all the time. This is about thinking about how do we survive as businesses, because investors are demanding action. Regulators are requiring this because there's an economic stability element to it, and there's market pressure. So once I started talking in those terms, oh my God, I stopped being a lawyer, I started being a management consultant. Literally. I actually one day picked up my desk and moved to another office, and I became a management consultant, sold my law firm to my partners, and started a management consulting firm that once we started talking in those terms, I couldn't hire people fast enough. And that's when I said, can't I build software? So we did. Remember this? So this was the best-selling phone for 40 years. This is a best-selling phone for 40 years, and then we changed. Every business used this phone, and then we changed. And I say when I talk to people on this, did you think we'd be talking over Zoom today? We have to rethink the way we do everything. So we're going through the climate transformation just like we went through the digital transformation. And we're doing it way faster than we ever thought possible. There's $130 trillion that will move in the next 3 decades. $130 trillion, according to the Bank of America. Is your business going to be on the bottom or the top of that? Right? Everyone's going to have some reallocation of capital. And most of the time we think about metrics and targets, right? We think about what are our carbon emissions, but in order to have this transformation, we're going to have to actually think about what is the governance around this. My team always laughs at me. It's like, it starts with governance. Does your board understand this? Is your management aware? So these actually are the 4 pillars of what the securities regulators are requiring every company to talk about. So when you hear about climate-related financial disclosures, there's an SEC proposal right now out there. They're asking for people to align their financial disclosures with these 4 pillars. There's over 200 tech startups in the world right now talking about that first pit. And actually, we're one of the only that we know of that's doing all of this. So we offer full alignment with TCFD. We created a model. So me and my team at Manifest Climate, we have PhDs, we have lawyers, accountants, engineers, finance professionals, we have a lot of great technicians as well, and we've all thought about how do we bring this into a computer that we can scale. Because one of the things, like I was helping companies like RBC and big companies like Microsoft, and I thought, most companies don't have their budget to hire management consultants. We are disrupting management consulting by actually taking all this information in, putting it through our system, and then helping you have a simple communication out. Climate risk planning, to us, for defining the category, it means understand, manage, and communicate climate-related risk and opportunities. So we created a methodology that has over 400 data points, and we actually trained using our actual lawyer. I used to actually Control F, put it into a spreadsheet. So we actually realized, I created a model to teach AI, and I didn't know it. And then the AI can actually find climate-aligned disclosure better than I can now. So how we build it, we're kind of in the intersection between finance and the companies themselves. Because there's this question from investors, how are you thinking about climate change? And then the actual companies need to think about how they're actually talking to investors. So there's multiple use cases, which is really difficult for us because it's like, who uses Manifest Climate? Everyone, however they want. So our clients are actually coming to us with their own use cases. The most interesting one was one of the biggest utilities in the US actually said, you mean I can look into all my customers' climate plans and then sell them better solutions? Sure. So that's actually, it's way easier to sell if the salespeople think that there's a use case versus the environmental compliance people. So now we're actually starting to sell to sales, investor relations, no longer just sustainability teams. And that's what the platform looks like, a lot of dashboards, a lot of ways to help you track, monitor, and benchmark. But how can investment teams use it? So we might have some investors in the room. How can you actually ask the right questions of people? How can you engage? And how can you look for opportunities for alpha? And actually we think there's going to be a huge opportunity for alpha for those that understand their climate story and understand how they can take advantage of that $130 trillion. These are some of our clients. We've just been around for a couple of years. Some of you may know we raised about $30 million in 2 rounds of financing. It's a good time to be in climate tech and be a woman, I guess, but it wasn't always this easy. So I'm glad that people are now coming to the party, happy to chat with you guys about how we can all work together. Thanks.
While Jason gets ready, I'll ask the first question. So you're a lawyer.
Yeah.
How did you find it?
Actually, I got administratively suspended.
Okay, what? Okay, well, that sounds like a story you got for beers.
Yeah, thank you. All you do is stop paying your fees.
You know, lots of people put up their hand here saying they're looking for a developer as a co-founder. So how did you find your co-founder?
Oh my God, great question. So my co-founder is Jeremy Grevin. Some of you may know him. He's a repeat founder. I started asking everyone I know for basically, I described him. I was looking for about a year, and I was saying, because I was thinking, how am I going to do this? I hired one product manager. I actually had one of my strategists, that's what we call the consultants. It's like, okay, let's think about how you actually build software. I think we need a product person. Like, that's how, I didn't know anything. So I hired a product person who got one deck together, and as I was having all my other meetings, if I thought someone might know something about building software, I'd show them this other deck. And then I got a lot of advice. I was thinking about third-party software developers. Someone said, you need to build it in-house. You need someone who can attract the right talent. I'm sorry, but developers aren't going to want to work for you. And so that was something that I understood and agreed with. And I just asked everyone I knew. I'm looking for someone who's a repeat founder, probably had a win, understands how it can attract a team, and I asked the right person, who happened to be our mutual coach, and he said, I happen to be working with Jeremy. And then we had one meeting, and then he offered to co-found this with me, and I told him to go screw off. I wasn't looking for a co-founder, I was looking for a CTO. And then we went through a couple months of negotiation, and we've been happy co-founders ever since. Yeah.
Hi, I have a friend who he's working on a startup where they analyze the costs for sustainable practices and help companies sort of figure that out. Might be an interesting connection. If you want, I could connect the two of you. Just thought I'd offer.
I'm glad to see, like, there's so many people in the space right now. It's great that the community is growing.
The best way is to add each other on LinkedIn so you can find her. In fact, she didn't include her name there, but it's Laura Z-I-Z-Z-Z-Z-Z-Z-Z.
There's only three Z-I.
3 Zs.
Yeah.
There's 3 Zs in there, and you can forward that profile to your friend and be like, hey, shoot your shot with a cold message to Laura's LinkedIn email inbox and see if you get her attention. Or come hang out at TechTO, where you can meet all sorts of awesome founders like Laura Z-I-Z-Z-Z-Z-Z-Z-O. Okay, we'll take one more question.
Jason owns shares in Microsoft for people that don't know.
It's true. Alex, you're up for the last question.
I already asked a question.
Ask one more.
No one wants. I've scared everyone about climate change. That happens.
How many more years do we
I actually am
have,
jealous
Laura?
about the art thing. I want to do that instead. Too bad I have a calling. It sucks sometimes.
So I'm curious.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Well, both.
You go for it. You go for it.
Okay, sure. So I noticed you work with Etsy. And I was
Yeah.
curious, like as an example, how does that work? How does Etsy use you?
Oh, interesting. Yeah, Etsy is really interesting because they understand they want to have a sustainability story. They want to understand what their climate issues, but they're publicly traded and they needed to understand their scenario analysis, which is what everyone has to do, right? What does the future look like for us? And how do we fit into it? So we actually conducted a qualitative scenario analysis for them, saying, how are you going to be sustainable into the future? How are you thinking about everything from, where you're getting your energy from, where your suppliers are? Are they at risk? How do you think about your supply chain? And then they were able to talk about that. So you'll see us referenced in their latest financial disclosure as their support for their TCFD compliance. So we do a gap analysis about what they're saying, what they should say differently based on benchmarking, and then help them actually move forward. Yeah, it's really that was a really cool. We said, "Do you want to pay us in trinkets?" We would take trinkets, but they paid us real money.
Thank you, Laura.
Okay, thanks so much.